Well, Mr. Sergeant, I can see you now. Sarge, welcome back. Introduce yourself.
Shall I
You know
stand
the
up a little
drill.
higher so you can see me?
No, you go ahead. Introduce yourself. Give us your testimony. You got 2 minutes.
I'm Bill Sargent. I'm the former Chief Deputy Clerk for Elections in Galveston County, and I'm testifying on behalf of myself in favor of the bill. I fully support this bill. There are 3 improvements, however, that could be made, and these are: first, Section 31.005 needs to be updated to give the Secretary of State the authority to step in where there are violations of the Texas Election Code, not just voting rights violations. Secondly, we need to prohibit the pre-filing pre-filling in of the party and annual ballot by mail data fields on unsolicited absentee ballots that are sent out to voters. And I'll get to that in a minute as to why, but we want people to get the right ballot and what they ask for. Thirdly, we need to strike the part of the government code that prohibits judges and alternate judges excuse me, from hiring members of their own family. There's an Attorney General opinion that says they cannot do that. The specifics are in my handout that you all have in your hands. Let me give you a short version of what this is about. Some of the election judges have not allowed bona fide poll watchers into their polling place. This is under Section 31.005. If we rely upon the courts to address this, damage is already done, because by the time the courts get it, the election's over. Allowing the Secretary of State to step in and say, call the DPS and say, we understand this is happening. Would you go by and look at it and investigate it? If indeed it's happening, stop it. If it's not going to, make sure you can let the person into the polling place to do what they need to do. Secondly, people get wrong ballots.
Go ahead and finish that thought. Just wrap that one up. Thanks.
We have situations where people get these unsolicited ballots from the parties and the campaigns, and they're filled in. It says, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, and it says, I want an annual ballot by mail. During the primaries, we get hundreds of people who are coming to us and saying, you sent me a Republican or Democratic ballot. I'm from the other party. How come I got that? It's because it was pre-filled. The voter didn't read it. Then in November, wait a minute, I didn't ask for this ballot by mail. How come you sent it to me? I mean, did you bring it with you to the polling place? No. What'd you do with it? I shredded it. Well, guess what? You got to vote provisionally.
All right.
And that makes them ticked off.
I bet it
so
does.
by precluding that from being filled in, let the campaigns send out whatever they want to as far as applications for ballots by mail, but don't fill those 2 fields in.
Yeah. Senators, any questions from Sergeant? Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sergeant, you have been involved in elections for a number of years.
Since 2006.
In a sizable county. And you've heard the discussions about the idea of trying to simplify our election system and make it easier to vote and harder to cheat, I think is what has been kind of adapted to where we're trying to go as a basic philosophy. And one of the things we have that makes it complicated is the fact that we have 3 separate election processes: early voting, election day, and mail-in ballots. And I've been talk about trying to simplify that by merging our early voting and election day into an in-person voting, just like 21 other states are doing. I think you've talked about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, I certainly support looking at it and doing it. I mean, among other things, it makes it cheaper for us to run elections, because you don't have to have as much equipment, because you can't use early voting equipment for election day. You can't use election day equipment for early voting. So if you have one election period, you can use the same equipment. You can run the 0 tapes ahead of time. You can run the tally tape at the end of the period, and it's all in the same equipment. So that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Now, you talked to Keith Ingram earlier, and there are a lot of pieces in the code all over the place that you got to fix to get that done, but it can be done. And I'd be happy to try to help doing that at some point in the future. I think it's.
You mentioned the 0 tapes and the tally tapes. How important are those to have as a check on what actually is being reported from the precinct?
Well, when I was running the elections, we ran the zero tapes, because we're a countywide vote center. We ran the 0 tapes on the old equipment. ahead of time in the warehouse. And the reason we did that is because we had, well, in November of 2012, we ran the zero tapes, and all our polls opened 3 or 4 hours late because we had to run 16,000 zeros, because you run every single precinct, every single vote, every single contest. But with the new equipment that we have now, it can do it automatically as a summary. In fact, James, I gave you a copy of your staffer, a copy of how that's done, and it only takes a matter of minutes now. So we can do that. We can also do the same thing with the tally of the vote at the end of the time. Of course, you also check the machine to make sure that the public count is 0 when you start the election, and the judge and the alternate judge both sign that to verify that it's correct. It's important as an integrity measure to do that. And chain of custody is very important.
And the tally tape at the end.
The tally tape at the end. In fact, if you don't have the early voting in election day, you run the tally tape at the end of the period. It tells you every vote that every candidate got in that precinct or in that location. So if you're doing a countywide vote centers, candidate A got this many votes in this place. Candidate B got this many for all the races. And so you have that as a check against what's on the card. These two should match. If they don't match, you've got a problem.
Right. And currently we've got about a 3-day time period in which the card could be changed, and this would preclude that from happening, wouldn't it?
That's correct, because you're retooling the equipment. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hall, thank you. Members, any other questions? Thanks, Mr. Sergeant, for being
Thank you,
here. Thanks
sir.
for offering
God
your
bless you. Have a
expertise.
good day.
Bless you.